MicroStrategy stock has been on a tear over the last year. As you can see, the stock is up over 10x, 1,000% return in a little bit more than 12 months. And it just got added to NASDAQ 100. And in this video, I'm going to show you how I think the party is just beginning. And there's a 20x in front of us. MicroStrategy is a publicly traded company that is run by Michael Saylor. It is known for its Bitcoin strategy, but MicroStrategy actually has a software business. And years ago, Michael Saylor did not believe in Bitcoin. He actually made a famous tweet that Bitcoins is going to go to zero and that its days are numbered. And then in 2020, he put Bitcoin on the balance sheet of MicroStrategy. So he took the cash that came from the software business and he put it all into Bitcoin. And then since then, he used the equity by issuing shares and debt by acquiring more Bitcoin. Today, as you can see, the stock price of MicroStrategy is over $400, and then the market cap of the entire company is close to $100 billion. Now, even though MicroStrategy has the software business, the majority of the value assigned to MicroStrategy is the Bitcoin holdings. And so based on the number of Bitcoins that MicroStrategy holds today, about half of this is in Bitcoin. So about 40 billion or so is in Bitcoin. And as a result of this, some people are saying that you should short the stock, that it's overvalued because it's valued at more than its Bitcoin holdings. But I think they are missing the point, because the overvaluation is actually the key of why I think the stock has a lot more upside. And here's why. Okay, since 2021, MicroStrategy's holdings of Bitcoin went up significantly. In 2021, they had 124,000 of Bitcoin. In 2022, they had 132. 2023, or at the end of 2023, they had almost 190,000 Bitcoin. And as of today, as of December, they have 423,650 Bitcoins. Okay? Now, in order to acquire these Bitcoins, as I said, they either issue shares or convertible debt, and that convertible debt can convert, right? So the number of shares went up double since 2021, right? Because it used to be 100 million shares, then 110 million shares, 160, and now it's almost 200 million shares. Now, what's important is the Bitcoin yield, or the number of Bitcoins per share. So this is this metric. So in 2021, it was 0.0012, 2022, 0.0012, 2023, 0.0012, and then in 2024, it was 0.0021. So in other words, the number of Bitcoin per share doubled, right? That's the Bitcoin yield. And the stock was pretty much at the same level for 3 years. And then it bottomed in 2022, because that's when the price of Bitcoin declined. And then it was a 20x from 2022 to now, because people woke up to the fact of what MicroStrategy was doing, and also price of Bitcoin went up. So what the strategy is behind MicroStrategy is to increase the Bitcoin per share. That's the Bitcoin yield. And they're going to continue buying Bitcoin. And now, currently, they have 423,000 Bitcoins, right? At $100 per Bitcoin, that's about $40 billion, right? That's what I said, the holdings. Their market cap is twice as much. So in other words, they are valued at 2 times Bitcoin holdings. So if you were the CEO interested in buying more Bitcoin, what would you do? Well, it makes sense to issue more shares because they are overvalued, right? And then take that and buy more Bitcoin, right? So they could literally double the number of shares from about 200 million to 400 million, right? If they issued an extra 200 million shares, what would they get? Well, they would get $100 billion, right? The current market cap. What would the $100 billion get them at 100,000 per Bitcoin? Well, it would get them 1 million Bitcoins. So they would dilute 100%. They would get 1 million Bitcoins. They would have a total of 400 million shares. And combining it with the current Bitcoin holdings, they would have almost 1.5 million Bitcoins, 400 million shares, and then the Bitcoin yield would almost double again. It would be 0.0035 from the current 0.0021. And now, of course, I'm not saying that they would do such a transaction like in one swoop, but you could see something like this playing out over the next three years, right? And it could take a form of convertible debt that eventually does convert into shares. And then the resulting effect would be double the number of shares for the double the yield, Bitcoin yield. Because they already did that. They already showed us that the number of shares in 2021 was 100 million. They doubled it. And as a result, they doubled the Bitcoin yield. So why couldn't they do it again? They could very easily double the number of shares from 200 million to 400 million and then double the Bitcoin yield, right? And now, if they were to do that, they would own 1.5 million Bitcoins out of 21, right? So what is that? 1.5 divided by 21. That would be about 7% of all the Bitcoins, right? While others are adopting Bitcoin, right? It's very unlikely in such scenario that the price of Bitcoin would not go up, right? There's more adoption. Bitcoin, there's only so many of them, and countries, people are adopting it, right? I mean, if you have a view that Bitcoin is going to go up, that strategy would work. But by buying more Bitcoin and increasing the Bitcoin yield for MicroStrategy, they are literally creating their own success by pulling the supply out of the circulation, and also by him going out and educating other companies to do this and other investors to do this. He is literally creating his own success by creating demand for a finite number of Bitcoins, right? So if the price of Bitcoin were to stay at $100,000, then the value of Bitcoin per share, based on today's price, based on the new number of shares, would be about $355. But remember, they always get a premium, right? But now, if the price of Bitcoin goes to 250, look what happens to the value of Bitcoin per share for MicroStrategy. Almost $900 per share. If they get a premium 2 times their holdings, now we're talking about 4 times your money from the current stock price of about 410. That's what it is today, right? But people like Michael Saylor, people that study Bitcoin, realize that that's probably not the ending price. They're talking about $1 million and more. So in that case, with this number of shares, the value of Bitcoin per share for MicroStrategy shareholders would be $3,500, right? And giving them a yield, giving them a pricing of 2 times their holdings, that's how you arrive at 7,000 or 7,100. And based on the current stock price, that is almost 20 times your money. Now, of course, during this time, Bitcoin will continue being volatile and MicroStrategy will continue being volatile. I can totally see a situation where, the price of Bitcoin goes up, crashes, and MicroStrategy is going to crash even more because it's a levered play to Bitcoin. But this is a roadmap of how the stock of MicroStrategy is most likely on the path of 10x to 20x under this scenario that they continue increasing the Bitcoin yield by strategically diluting, pulling the supply of Bitcoin out of circulation and on their balance sheet, and as a result, combined with the education and adoption, as a result, seeing the price of Bitcoin continue to go up. This thing is a rocket ship in the making. Now, let me know your thoughts. What do you think about this?